When you first go there, you're entitled to get to pay for to live in residence. That means live on campus in one of their residential buildings. After second year, it's up to lottery. There's a significantly higher demand for living space than there is supply. And in my later years, I'd heard that some of my classmates never found a place to live and chose to just pay for parking and live in their cars and shower at the gym and eat at the cafeteria. At that point, the problem is not cost, it's supply.
Hi, my name is Shani. I'm the host for this podcast. I'm here with my guest, Charlie. He was a student at UVic and BCIT. At BCIT, he studied business, and at UVic, he studied philosophy and comp sci. Hi, Charlie. It's so nice to have you today.
Hi, Jeannie. Thanks for having me today. Glad to be here.
Yeah, of course. All right. So, I guess the first question I like to ask is what's it like living in a country with two official languages and kind of a lot of cold weather?
Exactly. Yeah. I live in Vancouver. That's West Coast, and it's actually among the more temperate parts of Canada. But I have been to some parts of Canada that are way colder than this. Now, happily, right now, beautiful sunny day, and I think that for like 3 weeks out of the year, it's a beautiful, perfect place to live. The rest of the time, it's either raining or windy or sometimes even snowing. And the driving culture here is pretty extreme, and you really got to know your way around. But I found it very comfortable because I grew up here, and I really don't mind the rain. As someone wise once said, the cold never bothered me anyway. And one thing that I enjoyed
Yeah.
about this kind of weather, though, is that at least it's exciting. At least it's interesting. I don't think that I would enjoy living in a place that was always one kind of weather the whole time. Right. Speaking of which, again, West Coast, not too many people here speak French. Although when you do meet someone who speaks French, it is very interesting. I did study French in elementary school and throughout high school and even a little bit in university. We did something called French immersion, which basically you start learning French and English at the same time. And I like to tell people that English is my third language because we actually learned French in kindergarten and grade one, and I never learned to speak English formally until grade two. And at home, I spoke Cantonese, but now we speak English.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I actually took French immersion too, so I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, okay. So in this podcast, we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about what's it like going to school here in BC and yeah, just kind of like the experience, like the cost of living, because
Mhm.
I mean, Vancouver's a little bit pricey, but we're definitely gonna dive more into that and also a little bit more into like the weather, what's it like living in a bit of a colder climate environment, especially like surviving like Canadian winters and all that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So, all right, amazing. So, I guess my first question I'd like to ask you is like, kind of like, what's the difference for you between going to university and going to high school? What's the difference from high school to university here?
That's a great question, and I think that for the most part, the learning cultures of high school and university is where the difference is, right? I think that academically, at least, just focusing on the schoolwork, yes, there's a lot of it, but if you time the work well and you learn to take an L some of the time for courses that you either don't care about or that you're pretty confident that you'll be able to make it up in the test, high school is not that challenging academically. It's balancing your social life, perhaps extracurricular activities, and things like that. And the school will pretty well push you through because their metrics matter as well. Right, they're responsible to the state. There's a public body that oversees how well kids are able to graduate. And at least in my year, I think they were still doing provincial exams. Right, my year was the year that they took out all the optional provincial exams. So people who wanted to do the ones in socials or something like that, there's only English, math, and for me, French. Uh, which is to say that you learn very quickly how to how to beat the test, right? How to study so that you can advance to the next lesson, or so that you can please your teacher. And I was always the kid in the front of the class with my hand up, making everybody else wait, right? I have a bit of a outspoken personality, and it doesn't matter to me that everybody else is like, let's move this along, right? But at least it prevents the teacher from saying things that we don't expect. That being said, I don't know if I really learned the material. right? What you learn is how to study for the test, how to study to anticipate what your teacher is going to ask you. And that is a way of learning that you sort of adopt as you go through that process, even from elementary school. But when you get to university, and this is something that mattered a lot to me as a learner with special needs, was that you need to learn first how you learn, which is different from how you have been instructed throughout high school. Because honestly, in university, your teachers, it doesn't matter to them if you pass, right? And in fact, in some classes, they have required failing metrics in addition to required passing metrics. For example, in UVic, I took the math class 3 times in a row, and I couldn't do it no matter what I did. Um, and to some degree, I blame my dad's advice. All my friends did calculus, AP calculus in high school. And my dad said, "Oh, don't waste a free elective on that. The government is paying for your education in high school. Take something interesting, and you're going to do calculus in high school, university anyway." But by the time I got to university, all of my classmates had already seen this material and they were able to keep doing it a lot easier. And in addition to the sort of culture shock of needing to be responsible for my own decisions, get to class on time, allocate my own time and study when I can, as well as manage this new, suddenly a lot more challenging academically material, that was very difficult. But as I took the time to learn habits of how to best study, how to arrange my environment to make it easier for me to learn and to minimize distraction or to compartmentalize, that's when I was really hitting my stride. And I think that if I went back now, I probably could do calculus, but heaven forbid, I don't intend to need to do that for the rest of my life.
I've never done it. I honestly, I'm not very good at math, so I could not even do that far. So congrats to you for even doing that because yeah, that's difficult. I don't think I would have been able to do that at all. All right, do you want to talk a little bit about what's the cost around the cost about going to
Right.
school, maybe at UVic, BCIT, books, rent, tuition, that
Mhm.
sort of thing?
Yes, thank you. So, I consider myself a very privileged person, especially in the field of education, because my parents were A, very proud of me for being able to get into university, and B, had no expectation that I would at all. And so, though they had a big college fund for me, they were more than happy to pay for at least my first round of education. That being said, it was another place, and I couldn't just live off mom and dad, so I did have to rent a little bit there. And I guess to make it easy for themselves, they primarily put me on a bit of an allowance, the majority of which went to rent. The cost of living there is less than Vancouver, or less what was at the time, but I think it was still among the higher costs of living. I think that my total rent was about $1,000 a month, um, for a two person suite. And so we had to band together, my roommate and I, to manage that. And that was only the sort of second half when I lived in a more upscale part of town. Later on, or earlier on, I was struggling to find a place to live because at least in UVic, when you first go there, you're entitled to get to pay for uh, to live in residence. That means live on campus in one of their residential buildings. But after second year, it's up to lottery. There's a significantly higher demand for living space than there is supply. And in my later years, I'd heard that some of my classmates never found a place to live and chose to just pay for parking and live in their cars and shower at the gym and eat at the cafeteria, right? Which again is not nothing, right? At that point, the problem is not cost, it's supply, right? And I was very fortunate to at once get a place to live that was in a complex where another of my friends lived, and they said, "Oh, we've got this place, and in fact, we know a couple of guys who are looking to buy a place to live too." So we all banded together and rented there, and it was a dive. All right, it was I think it was like a 4 acres of very high population density. One of my roommates was just a guy off Craigslist that none of us had ever seen before, and he was weird. And if we have time, we talk about that later. That is, I think, a story for another time. But suffice to say that at the time, expense was not the problem. I think that it's been almost 15 years now, well, almost 10 years now, and real estate prices, cost of living has dramatically inflated. But also, I went back to Victoria recently and I saw that there are many new developments upcoming. The student housing complex that was planned in my year and was beginning to be executed in my roommate's year has now been finished. And so there is a little bit more supply. But just because we're starting to meet demand means that they'll continue to maintain or perhaps even continue to inflate the prices. My recommendation then is to, yes, take whatever they give you at res for the first year and spend the entire year thinking about a new place to live in the coming terms. It's always easier, as they say, to get a job or to look for a job when you already have one. I'm sure the same applies to housing as well. And be very intentional as well about if you make good friends, feel free to say, how would you like to be roommates? Right. So that you can split up the cost of living as well. And
Yeah,
those are some
no,
of the
that
relationships that you will maintain for the rest of your life.
I think that's definitely some really good tips. I know that housing here is expensive, even in Victoria. I'm originally from Victoria, and I've rented
Mhm.
there as well. So, really, yeah, I definitely relate to that struggle. All right, now I'd like to ask you, how were you able to balance student life, basically homework with job, if you had a part time job, and like just your social life? How did you make all that work together?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question as well. In the first couple years, as I said, it was a big culture shock. Suddenly being responsible for all of these academic achievements, but also balancing my schedule and trying to make room for having a social life that I was told would be very impactful to me as a student, right? And I think I didn't do a very good job of that in the beginning. I would try to devote too much time to my duties in my club and with the expectation, and again, we talked about this, how in high school the teachers kind of push you through, and some even tailor the experience to make sure that you can pass, right? With the
Mhm.
expectation of that level of support, I allocated time to study and to spend socially and to even eat and take care of myself without really having a good understanding of the changes that it would take in order to thrive academically in this new setting. And as one thing started slipping, the rest started slipping. Right. And I ended up having to take a year off and do a co op and sort of reset. Right. And again, I would recommend doing a co op if they're available in your program. At the time, I was doing computer science. And so there's all kinds of computer science co ops. There are fewer philosophy co ops, which is why I then had to go into business school. But by that time, after I'd returned from that co op, after having reassessed and reorganized some of my life, I think that I was really able to find a balance after being able to say to some people, here are some things that I need to learn better, or here are some things that I think that you can help me do that will enable me to learn better. And that's not just my friends or perhaps the teachers, but there are school facilities like supporting, student education facilities, as well as advocacy groups that will help you first discover what it is you need and then help you ask for it, right? And I think that the one thing that was very useful to me is realizing that I do need to study outside my dorm room, right? Your living space is for living, your space is for eating, your bedroom is a place to sleep. And having these not just distractions, but patterns, physical patterns nearby tends to divert your focus, right? One thing I
Yeah.
got really good at then is working the lab in the computers lab, or working in the philosophy lounge when I had it there. It was often joked that the philosophy lounge has three couches, a blackboard, a computer, a little mini fridge with a coffee maker on top, and all kinds of books. And it was a beautiful, sunny lit room. And the in the summer, nobody used it except for me. I would walk in there bright and early with my books and my tea, and I would ask the philosophy office to unlock it for me, and I would leave the door open. Anybody can come in and talk to me, but nobody came in there until some teachers walked by and they said that I had the biggest office in the philosophy wing. But yeah, one thing that I also started to use, and this led to figuring out for myself how I learn the best, and this also played into some of my social activities, is that in the computer lab, there's all these computers facing the screen, and one computer facing the audience that the teacher would use. But in the computer lab, It's not a teaching office, and so it's only used there for teaching assistants and things like that. And I would prefer to use the teaching assistant's computer because it's next to the whiteboard, and I could project my homework on the screen and actually do it on the board. And anybody who walked in, including my own classmates, it would become an informal sort of peer tutoring session, right? And talking through what I'm trying to understand and seeing their perspectives of the question and trying to think about different ways to say what I already understand helps me sort of wrap my head around it. And that's a skill that I learned in philosophy. I was applying it to computer science, but it's a skill that I learned through philosophy. And I think that that's a skill that everybody can do if you're comfortable with being on stage. Um, Being able to help others and walk through something with others gives you different perspectives, which allows you to more fully master a concept, right? And of course, that made me very popular. I was not only the guy who was able to talk to a lot of people and help them when they needed help and gain the respect of my classmates by being unafraid to ask questions that they themselves were feeling sheepish about. They would text me their questions, and I would be the guy at the front of the classroom with my hand up, talking on behalf of the students. Um, but yeah, I think that that rolls in well with my personality as well.
That's good. I think having a structure also is really helpful because I know when I went to school, I struggled a lot as well with like,
Mm.
doing homework and studying, especially like at home in my dorm room. Definitely don't recommend that because it's like there's so many
Mhm.
distractions. You have your roommates there sometimes, and you want to chat or you kind of get distracted and you want to do something else, or you want to eat, and so you're not really focused on like actually like for me it was even like just like I think going to like just like living on campus for me was hard because I feel
Mm.
like I don't know. I think I need that school and like home separation in order to like be more
Right.
successful is what I found. So, but yeah, no, those are very good insights. And actually, I'd like to ask people on social media now. You guys can message in the comments. What was the biggest challenge that you guys have faced trying to study? Do you have any tips maybe for like better study habits? And now for you, Charlie. My other question is: were there any clubs that you've joined at your time at UVic or BCIT? Any good sports? Anything that maybe if students are coming and they want to meet people, what are some clubs that you could recommend to them or sports groups?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this a while ago, but actually, I was part of the Christian club at both schools, and the club that I was part of is part of a network of clubs that's across many different campuses in different universities across British Columbia. And I was part of the same club, but in two different schools. And so there was some continuity there. And it's not to say that I earned my place or whatever, but it allowed me to transition between these two schools with the same sort of expectations and being able to make friends in the same way. And I'm not saying that that's right for everybody, but and of course all different religious clubs are different, but going to a club with the express purpose of forming a community, right? I think that that's a really good way to start, right? Things like sports teams or math teams or team oriented clubs are groups of people forming a community that work towards the same goal. And I think that religious communities are a lot of the same way. But they do require as much or perhaps even more time devotion as sports clubs, right? Again, you're exercising your body, you're gaining a skill, you're trusting in your teammates. And to some degree, you may even assume a leadership role. And I think that that's one way in which specifically university campus clubs, um, with the expectation that they're recruiting, freshman members to cover for the loss of their senior members. There's a high turnover rate there, which really makes the team leaders there very intentional about drawing you in and giving you responsibility. So that's one thing that I would recommend watching out for is not taking on too much responsibility too soon. And that was one of my problems when I was in the first couple of years is that again, if you're good at something, people will ask you to do it for them, right? In the same way as if you were on a sports team or the chess club or something like that. Oh, you're already an excellent soccer player. Can you also be the team manager? Right? Because we don't need to support you in any more ways, right? So yes, being intentional about seeking out communities of like-minded people where you can have support in things that that you care about and that matter to you, um, in and outside of the academic circle. That's important. It's especially useful when people in your club are also in your classes, because then you can have extra friendships that way, or else if they're one of your roommates or something like that. But taking on additional responsibility just because they ask you to, or because you think that it'll add to your prestige within the group, is a great way to become overloaded, especially if you haven't nailed down your academics, right? I didn't party much in those schools. BCIT is not known for being a party school, but UVic is for sure. And I was part of the sort of quiet dorm, and so I avoided some of that. But even my dorm, I remember waking up in a fever dream one night. A party had rolled down the hallway, entered my room that was unlocked, left in a whirlwind like the Tasmanian devil, and went on their way. And I woke up in a pile of cups. It was, yeah. Anyway, that was my partying when I did there at university. But even that, right? Being able to meet people and go to parties with the expectation of just having a good time and making sure that you leave with the same people that have your back, I think is a good way to enjoy that as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's very important. No, I totally, yeah, I totally get that. I think I agree with that as well. Now, do you want to touch a little bit about networking? What are any advice that you could give for students that maybe want to network at a school here? What are some
Mhm.
good tips for networking?
This pertains primarily to technical schools or vocational schools like BCIT, but the instructors there and the teaching assistants and perhaps even some of the alumni are there because they were experts in the field. And it's necessarily true that all the elite members of a community intersect, right? And of course, it's easy for me to say because I was the teacher's pet and it's easy to suck up, but try to become good at, um, if not making friends with, then being authentic with your instructors and the other students that you know are destined for great things. Again, it's hard to tell that in the first year, but as you make friends, you'll eventually realize that there are people who have their lives together, and you can surround yourself with those people, and they'll be an advantage to you, and you can be a support to them as well. One of my friends at BCIT, I actually got a job for her working where I work because she was a big help to me when I was at BCIT. In addition to being a student and a member of the student council for the School of Business, I was also the sort of class leader. It started as an informal role because, again, everybody else was younger. This was my second degree, and not many people were comfortable speaking up in class. I was always the guy in the front of the room with my hand up. So they said, let that guy be the class rep, right? But because I had so much on, I needed someone to help me with the administrative aspect of those things, and she was right there. And I am great at public speaking, but I'm no good administratively. And having someone be able to support you and serve the class in different ways, right? You learn the value of delegation, you learn the value of teamwork, but really you learn the value of being able to trust things to other people, and then you find the trustworthy people. And even if you end up in very different fields, everybody knows everybody and everywhere, especially in a small town like Vancouver. It looks big, but it's among the least populous places, right? Like,
It's true. It's true. I agree with that.
yeah, like the land mass of BC is as big as Japan. And yet in the space of Tokyo, there's as many people as there are in Canada, right? So
Wow.
it's it's not it's not a big room. And again, I'm part of a number of other communities that are quite small as well, especially the, I don't know if anybody's going into performance, but the performance industry, everybody knows everybody because there are so many productions, especially here, that everybody needs to intersect, right? In dance, in music, in theater, in other kinds of performance. I know some acrobats and stuff like that. And learning to be authentic with all of those people will cause the people that jive with you to want to reach out. But you're giving yourself a leg up by picking people that are already established in the community, right? So teachers is a good option. Some schools have an entrepreneurship department that'll help you get started in business. Some places have job fairs, community job fairs that they'll come in and have booths and stuff like that. That's a good place to start. But again, knowing that person is more important than knowing about the field. So if you can quickly establish yourself and come with your resume and a handshake, it's not just about selling yourself, it's about actually being curious about the people around you.
Yeah. No, those are all really good tips. Yeah, I think that networking is super essential, especially when you want to go into the job market for any jobs. And it's really awesome actually that you shared that you were able to get your job through someone that you knew at school and that you were able to network with. That's
Mhm,
amazing. Cause yeah, especially like in Vancouver too, it's so hard like finding jobs. I think,
mhm.
and with that too, I'd like to ask, like, what do you think is a good student job?
Right. So for jobs for students that are doing their job while they're working, right? Service industry comes to mind. A retail comes to mind. But I think that a really good way to use your time effectively in a sort of less committal way is volunteering while you're a student. Everybody loves to hear that, oh, is there any positions that I can help out with? I'm a student and I'm just looking for some volunteer hours, or I'm looking to get involved in a such and such community. Or is there any apprenticeships or entry level things that I can do? Those are good ways to work out. But one thing that really helped me, again, I studied philosophy, and though it has applications clearly in many different fields, it doesn't stand out in any particular field, right? You can go to law school, or you can be like in critical thinking or like a risk assessment and stuff like that, but you need additional qualifications. And so, actually, after I finished UVic with a major in philosophy and a minor in computer science, I had a hard time finding a job. And before I then decided to go to BCIT to sort of round out that education and join them together in business, uh, I ended up doing a lot of work at a temp agency. And the advantage of that is that they work around your schedule and they'll give you something different every week. So you can quickly see what you're good at or what you enjoy and what kinds of jobs are out there, right? And one advantage of that is that, especially when you're a student or when you're just out of school and you have all these opportunities, but you don't know which one to follow, it gives you a sense of, well, can I actually just try this job and see what it's like? And if you don't like it, it's just there for the week. But if you do like it and you're good at it, more often than not, again, temp agencies cost a little extra. Uh, a lot of the employers will be like, "Hey, you want to do this forever?" And they'll hand you a contract.
Nice. Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing about that. Yeah, so I'm really glad you came on this podcast and shared all your experiences. Now I'd just like to, yeah, recap a little bit of what we were talking about. So yeah, guys, definitely know how to balance your time well when you're studying your clubs. Make sure that, obviously you put your priorities first things first, right? So you're there to do school, so obviously put your school first, but also very important to join clubs with like-minded people, and also great way to meet new people, connect, make friends, and also find people that are in your classes. So that way, if you ever need help in a class, then you kind of, it's almost like a cool way also to network, I think. And yeah, let's talk about networking too, which is really important. And yeah, and just like student life in general. So thank you so much for sharing about that. Yeah, I guess that would be my takeaway is just, yeah, like make sure that you know how to manage your time well and figure out what works for you,
Hmm.
like just your learning style and all of that. Yeah, and I just encourage you guys to subscribe if you want to hear more stories like Charlie's. And in our next episode, we're going to be talking about acting school. So our next guest, she goes to an acting school here in Vancouver, and she's originally from Quebec. So we're actually doing the interview. We're doing the podcast in French. So hopefully you guys, if you want to learn a little bit of French, hopefully you guys can stick around for that. It's going to be a good one. So thank you so much for joining the podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.